Yo, so, you know, I comb through a lot of news, so I can give you an objective outlook on today's politics. Um, you know, Trumpito is trying to clean out this swamp, and it's a lot of monsters he's pulling out. So, to try to have a whole board of people that's like-minded. Yesterday, two Democratic officials were fired. They were commissioners who served on the Federal Trade Commission, or they call it the FTC. The Federal Trade Commission is an independent agency of the United States whose like primary purpose is antitrust laws and consumer protection practices. They basically prevent unfair business practices. But Commissioner Alvera Bedoya and Rebecca Kelly Slaughter, they claim that they were fired illegally, and they intend to take it to Supreme Court to try to block Trumpito's orders. But look, why do these politicians feel like they can't be fired from these jobs? Okay, look, if you work for the country and the boss of the country wants to fire you, yo, it is what it is. My name is Marcus Russell. This is the Marcus Russell Show. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Let's get right to it.
It's typical when you're reporting at the White House to run into West Wing officials, Republican lawmakers, cabinet secretaries as they're making their way to and from meetings. One of the best ways to catch officials to ask questions is when they have TV interviews on the North Lawn of the White House. Often when they are coming back, the reporters are standing there. That happened today with one of President Trump's top economic advisors, Kevin Hassett, as soon as he wrapped an interview. This was coming about 24 hours after President Trump had summarily fired both of the Democratic commissioners who serve on the Federal Trade Commission, which they argued was an illegal move by the president. And it also raised questions, certainly in the business world, about whether or not that could mean that Trump is preparing to seek to fire other independent agency heads, like potentially the Fed chair, Fed board members. A question that I posed to Mr. Kevin Hassett. The president fired last night two members of the FTC, the Democratic members of that. It raised questions about whether or not he does respect the independence of the Fed, or he thinks that they are fair game as well. What is the president's view on that?
We very much respect the independence of the Fed. There's a massive literature that independent central banks perform better for economies. And so I don't think that's a...
So he doesn't think he can fire the Fed chair?
I think that's been resolved in the previous administration. You could go back and find a clip where I talked about it right in this space.
Those comments come after the press briefing where we heard from the White House press secretary on the firing of the FTC officials as she defended it.
The time was right to let these people go, and the president absolutely has the authority to do it. And they were given ample notice in a letter that I believe your outlet reported on. So it pretty much explains exactly why this administration chose to let those individuals go.
The ultimate goal to get this to the Supreme Court to try to overturn the 1935 precedent?
The goal was to let these individuals go. If we have to fight it all the way to the Supreme Court, we certainly will.
One of the fired commissioners, Commissioner Bedoya, told the New York Times, and I'm quoting now, when people hear this news, they need to not think about me. They need to think about the billionaires behind the president at his inauguration. My next source was appointed to the FTC by President Trump actually during his first term in 2018. She was the other Democratic commissioner fired by him yesterday. Rebecca Slaughter joins me now. And it's great to have you.
Hold on. Before I get to Rebecca Slaughter, yeah, it's definitely true that freeing up two spots of a five-member crew, and that definitely going to make space for two loyal, Trumpito commissioners. I agree with that. But like when you're building an empire, like I said, you need like-minded people, and you discard people who aren't. Now, I don't know about the legalities of having five Republican members on this five-person cabinet, but we'll just have to see, like they said, in court.
Because the statute that governs the FTC says that someone who is in your position cannot be fired only if they can be removed for cause if there is neglect, malfeasance, or inefficiency. Were you given any of those reasons when you were fired?
No, absolutely none.
And so what was there just any argument whatsoever beyond the letter you received?
The president can fire you, and so he chooses to do so, was the argument.
But you believe that's illegal?
It is absolutely illegal. The statute that you referenced is very clear on its face. And in fact, the Supreme Court has evaluated whether it is a constitutionally valid statute and whether a president can remove an FTC commissioner. Exactly this question. They faced it 90 years ago when FDR tried to remove an FTC commissioner, Commissioner Humphrey. And they said, No, the law is clear. They cannot be removed other than for cause, and that
No, they can be removed for cause. Can Trumpito fire people from independent agencies? Well, the FTC chairman, Republican Andrew Ferguson, he released a statement on X the other day saying that he had no doubts about Trump's constitutional authority to remove commissioners, and he added that this authority is necessary to ensure a democratic accountability. That part, Kelly
that is a
Slaughter.
constitutional law, and that precedent has not been overturned.
You said something interesting in your statement when you were fired, and you said that you believed, in part, it was because, quote, I have a voice, and he is afraid of what I'll tell the American people.
Yeah, what you got to
What is
tell
it that
us?
you have to tell the American people?
Yeah, well, it's
What
a
do you have
really
to tell
important
us?
point. I am a minority commissioner right now. That means I am not in charge of the agency. But what the FTC minority commissioners can do, and what commissioners at other independent agencies can do, is bring transparency and accountability to the work of the agency. So without the voice of the minority commissioners, if you see, for example, the FTC dismiss one of our many litigations against some of the big tech CEOs who flanked the president in his inauguration, you may not have any reason to know what was going on behind the scenes or what some other explanations or counter arguments will be. And that transparency and accountability has served the FTC really well for over 100 years.
And that's a very real thing. I mean, we have that picture of all of the CEOs who were flanking Trump at his inauguration, but the FTC is in active litigation with some of, maybe all of, a lot of these people.
Almost all of them. Almost.
You're looking at the names. And
I'm looking at the names right now. Almost all of them.
And so you're saying that in your position, you'd be able to speak out and say, okay, hey, they just dismissed this case against this company. Here's why I think that's a problem, or I disagree.
Yeah, so for example, in 2019, when I was in minority commissioner at the FTC settled a big privacy case with the company that was then called Facebook for a $5 billion payment. The majority of the time touted it as the largest payment ever and a huge successful win for law enforcement. But I said I disagreed, that I thought it wasn't nearly what the violations merited, and people should understand it as a slap on the wrist for a company that had the kinds of profits and revenue that Facebook had at the time. And that kind of accountability is important. And for what it's worth, it is the kind of accountability that our now chairman provided to the FTC when he served in the minority. He had no hesitation to dissent and express disagreement, and that actually makes the work of the agency better.
Yeah, and he wrote a lot when he was a minority member as well. I mean, and they have cases, one coming up against Meta with Mark Zuckerberg, who we often see at the White House. The new FTC chair that you talk about said in a statement that he wished you well. He thanked you for your service, but he said, quote, I have no doubts about Trump's constitutional authority to remove commissioners, which is necessary to ensure democratic accountability for our government.
That part. Yo, the two fire commissioners, they might have a case in the Supreme Court because the 5-member crews typically are comprised of 3 members of the current president's political party, and then 2 members of the opposing party. And so they got to have 2 Democratic commissioners. But Trumpito, he's the one that appointed the chick, Kelly Savage. So, I definitely can fire you if I'm the one that appointed you. But also, these positions, they typically last for 7 years. And you can only be ousted for a reason. But I'm sure they can just come up with a reason that's not hard to do. But see, that's the issue that they really trying to defend. Can Trump fire anybody that he wants to? You know what I'm saying? And so that's why taking this to the Supreme Court, this is basically going to decide whether future firings are legal or whether they can be disputed or not. Because everybody knows anybody who played crazy last time Trumpito was office is through. You're through. You blew it. And so I'm sure he's going to, this case is going to set the precedents. But he already runs the Supreme Court. So yes, they're trying to decide how much power Trumpito can wield. But the country supports this, man. I know I do. Tell me what you do in the comments. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Until next time.